G'day and welcome back to Reality Check Q&A, that day of the week when you get to ask me, Ross Coulthart, the hard questions. And here to be my blowtorch interrogator, Megan Middick. G'day, Megan. How are you?
I am good, Ross. We have had quite the busy week. How are you doing?
It's been an extraordinary week. I noticed that just today, Eric Burlison has revealed that Donald Trump is now going to be issuing a memo mandating the release of UAP files. This is great news, very, very positive development, and thank you to Eric Burlison for all the work he's doing along with the rest of the UAP caucus in Congress.
Well, we'll start with more on Burleson and Congress and what's going on over there. You are having quite some fun on X talking about this story, so we'd love your reaction to it. A new church-style committee investigation is definitely warranted into the CIA's and other agencies' continued suppression of UAP data. It's time for the blowtorch. What's going on here, Ross?
I'm very concerned, Megan, that the CIA has lost sight of where it sits in the intelligence community pyramid. It is subordinate to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi occupies a very, very important role in the US intelligence community. She's the US intelligence czar, and her office was created in 2004 in legislation that was specifically designed to stop the catastrophes that happened that led to the 9/11 terrorists causing a disaster that killed thousands of Americans. So a CIA spokeswoman today came out and criticized the fact that a person had given evidence, who was a CIA official, he'd given evidence without checking first with the CIA. Apparently the Congress is under some obligation to tell the Central Intelligence Agency that it intends to subpoena and question witnesses under oath before the Congress. This is an absurd notion, and I couldn't believe the breathtaking, hubristic arrogance of the spokeswoman for the CIA, who called the proceedings dishonest political theatre and actually accused a Senate committee of acting in bad faith by subpoenaing a CIA officer without notifying the CIA. The incredible thing about this is, I've checked, there is no legal obligation for the Congress, for the Senate, to notify the CIA about whether it intends to call a former or active CIA officer. Just in case the CIA has forgotten, the Congress is government of the people, for the people, by the people. The Congress has a constitutional right to oversight the CIA. And frankly, at the moment, the way the CIA is conducting itself, I do think it's time for a revisit. That was mooted, I think, by Senator Johnson from Wisconsin. He suggested that maybe it's time for a new church commission to investigate the illegalities and abuses of the CIA. Too many of the revelations about failure to heed UAP requirements for disclosure are going back to the CIA. Too much of the obstruction is coming from the CIA. John Ratcliffe, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, made much when he was out of the CIA about being open and transparent about UAP files. Now that he's in that office, what's he doing to control and constrain the gatekeepers inside the CIA who are responsible for hindering access by the Congress to files? Now, there's a very important matter that's come up before the Congress just in the last few days. A gentleman by the name of James Erdman. He's a former Ranger. Rangers lead the way. I've been in some sticky places with Rangers. They're good people. He served in the US Army's 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. He's a State Department Foreign Service officer in his time. He's received the DNI Award, the CIA Medal of Merit, and he was detailed to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence under Tulsi Gabbard as part of her Directors Initiatives Group, DIG, from roughly March last year to April this year. And he was reviewing intelligence community matters, including the origins of COVID. Now, at the moment, I guess he's left the DIG role. He's not strictly former CIA. He's been called a whistleblower. Some people dispute that, but let's not split hairs. He's somebody giving evidence in a way that the CIA clearly didn't like. And on the 13th of May, in testimony before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, which was chaired by Senator Rand Paul, they were looking at the origins of the COVID-19 origins cover-up. And Erdman stated that when the DIG ceased operations, the CIA took back 40 boxes of JFK files and MK Ultra files that were still in the process of being processed for declassification by the DNI, by DNI Gabbard. Now, he framed this as the CIA intervening to reclaim documents from the ODNI that were in the process of being declassified pursuant to President Trump's executive order, which demanded full declassification of all the remaining JFK assassination records with related efforts on MLK and RFK. Now, the implication was from this Erdman chap that the action circumvented oversight, that it was in some way blocking transparency, or that it was in some way a withholding of records long sought by Congress. Now, we can't be clear at the moment because it's just not clear what was in those boxes because the CIA has taken them back. But I think Representative Anna Paulina Luna is completely within her rights to demand that the CIA returns them and accounts to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence about what was in those boxes and gives a reassurance that nothing in them has since been destroyed. I frankly can't believe that the Director of National Intelligence Office, which has the legal authority, the DNI it's the head of the US intelligence community. Essentially, it's set up under the Intelligence Reform and Terrorism Prevention Act of 2004. The CIA director reports directly to the DNI. It is subordinate to the DNI. The DNI is the principal intelligence advisor to the president, not the other way around. So the authorities that the ODNI have include full access to all national intelligence, all national intelligence. The CIA is not allowed to withhold anything from the Director of National Intelligence. They also have at DNI full oversight of the National Intelligence Program budget that fully funds the CIA. So if the CIA is constraining access by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, by golly, they've better watch out. I have a sense that Tulsi Gabbard is not going to put up with any nonsense, and neither from the Congress side is Representative Anna Paulina Luna. Now, the CIA does have practical and legal authority to manage and reclaim physical custody of its own records, even while they are being processed for declassification by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. It doesn't have a unilateral power to override the Director of National Intelligence or a presidential executive order. And we're not saying that's what's happened here because we just don't know. So under Executive Order 13526, Classified National Security Information and Related Regulations, the CIA retains primary control and declassification authority for information it originally classified. The ODNI can review and direct declassification after consultation with the CIA. But the records themselves are typically loaned or referred to the Director of National Intelligence rather than permanently transferred. That doesn't mean that the CIA has the right to come in and just take those records away while the Director of National Intelligence Office is declassifying them. Because the reason this matters, we've been assured that all of the JFK records, the MLK records, and funnily enough, all the Epstein records have been released. And that's just not true. It's clearly not true from what we're being told today by this Erdman chap. And it's very important that he be supported. It's absolutely outrageous that the CIA feels it has the right and the contemptible arrogance to accuse the Congress of indulging in political theatre for calling somebody from the CIA without getting the CIA's permission first. Oh, Diddums, I'm sorry for you. The CIA is subordinate to the Director of National Intelligence. It's time it learned its ranking in the intelligence community pyramid. And there really is a question mark in my mind as to whether or not it's time, 50 years on from the Church Committee inquiry, to reassess the CIA and see whether it's time for them to be put under a rigorous blowtorch investigation where allegations of crimes, including the alleged murder of people in the UAP community, are brought to public light. How much longer is the President and the Congress going to put up with this bullshit nonsense from the CIA? Sorry, I've had my rant. Thank you very much.
All right, no problem. We will go into our inbox. This is from Antonio. Hi, Ross and Megan. Love your content on YouTube. Watch both your channels. The world needs more people like you. So the recent declassification of a bunch of UAP files had me thinking. I'm seeing a bunch of the videos and photographs getting debunked online. Is this just a big psyop from the US government whereby they release stuff, we, internet sleuths, debunk them all so they can just sit back and say, see, we told you so, nothing to see here, then carry on hiding the truth for years? Am I being too cynical? I really like to feel hopeful, but I really don't trust the Pentagon to deliver the goods. Keep up the good work, Antonio.
I think that's exactly what's going on. And I think the biggest indicator of this was when the former ARROW, the Pentagon UAP investigations boss, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, whom I suspect is actually deeply involved in the legacy program, came out and displayed a contumelious, arrogant disregard for the forthcoming release, predicting that it would be a big fat nothing. It's almost as if he knew what was coming. Funny that. Yes, I do think that there is an extremely high likelihood that people in the Pentagon and the intelligence community deliberately dropped the low-hanging, boring fruit in the sense that the public would go, oh, what a big yawn, and go away. I think they've been taken aback that there have been literally hundreds of millions of views of what, frankly, at the moment is a fairly underwhelming drop in the first tranche of UAP files. Hopefully, within the next week or so, there will be a further tranche which reveals more. If they continue with what I think is scant disregard for the President's demand that there be full UAP disclosure, I can tell you there is a distinct change of mood inside the Congress. When you have representatives calling for Church Committee inquiries into the CIA, I don't think the CIA knows what it's doing. I really don't. I don't think they have any sense or understanding of the depth of public anger and contempt for arrogant intelligence agencies that believe that they can roll roughshod over the public's right to know. Yes, there may be things that need to be classified in the protection of genuine national security concerns, but I do not think the CIA or any other intelligence agency should be making that decision. This takes us right back to what we've been talking about for months, which is the risk of catastrophic disclosure. There were key senators and congressmen who blocked the creation of a presidential records review panel in the Defense Appropriations Bill at the end of last year. If that Presidential Records Review Board had been instituted, you would have a 9-member panel of greybeards, people who were properly authorized and instructed in releasing national security information, who were able to operate independent of the intelligence community and make decisions about disclosure. Instead, because some individual inside the Congress decided to stop the release of UAP Presidential Records Review Panel data in legislation that would have allowed this panel to operate, we are no longer able to use that system of declassification. This is blowback on the people that tried to stop the release of UAP data. I can only reiterate, there is a very grave risk for the United States that if it doesn't move quickly to show good faith with the public on the release of UAP information, there is going to be a catastrophic disclosure. They don't know what's coming, and they'd better watch out. A lot of good people are waiting to see what the US government is going to do, and it's very important. And I think it's positive news that the president, through Eric Burlison, who's revealed this just today, Representative Burlison has revealed that the president will be releasing a memo very shortly. Representative Burlison has revealed that the president will be releasing a memo very shortly, which will institute into law a mandated requirement that UAP disclosure occur. And if there's a continuing attempt by people within the intelligence community, the Defense Department, and in the private military contractor community to try to gag this release, we're going to start naming and shaming them. And I think so also is the Congress. They truly had enough. There's a real change of mood right now. The public has smelt the blood in the water. Hundreds of millions of people have accessed the UFO site on the Department of War, and they want real information. They are not going to be bullshitted anymore.
All right, I've had to bleep you a couple times already today, so you're obviously doing really well. I love it.
Do I have to be bleeped? Why do I have to get bleeped on YouTube? Is there something about
I think we
laws?
do shit. I think it's shit that we always bleep you on.
What about
I'm definitely bleeping that. Yeah, I'm 100%. I can guarantee you. I'm bleeping that. Anything else we should try before I
No.
do this one?
I'll just think of suitable expletives that fall
Okay.
within the prescribed FCC definitions of acceptable language. Yes.
Okay, perfect. I know that you love the rules. We'll go to X. 1959 Super Lead wants to know, hi, Megan, can Ross comment on Dr. Lakatsky's statement regarding the disinformation spread by some of the whistleblowers that gave testimony to Congress, particularly to OSAP? Is disclosure being exploited, and who would benefit?
Okay, so Jim Lakatsky, is a former DIA intelligence analyst, rocket scientist, and director at the time of the Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program, or ORSAP. And there's been a long ding-dong going on between him and, let's name and shame, Lou Elizondo, who has talked about his role at ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And I have to admit, I still don't quite understand why James Lakatsky is still doing this, and I still also don't understand why Lou can't make a clear clarification about what ATIP's role was in relation to ORSAP. I suspect there is a lot more there to be told, but essentially what Jim Lakatsky said in a weaponized episode with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp was... I would say that I would hope that no one is lying to Congress. However, I know differently in these hearings. I know that people have lied, James Lakatsky said. They said what they said, and I can't go back and correct it, even though I have proof that could correct it. I can't do that. It's too late. He's a terrible tease, Jim, because he doesn't actually say who he's talking about. And so that's left fuel on the fire. It's inflamed speculation on social media about just who he's talking about. But the surrounding discussion and community analysis tie this directly to alleged misrepresentations of conflations involving ORSAP, the official congressionally funded DIA program that Lakatsky proposed, designed, and managed from 2008 to 2010, versus the latter informally nicknamed continued effort, sometimes called ATIP. And I know Lou Elizondo has at times asserted that ATIP was associated with part of ORSAP, and Jim Lakatsky has rejoinded that that is not the case. And look, there is a bigger story here, and I think it has a lot to do with Lou Elizondo's true role as a counterintelligence official in the Defense Department. That's as far as I'm prepared to go. At some stage, Lou, I think, is going to have to give a clearer accounting of what his precise role was, both in the alleged ATIP program and possibly also in his knowledge of and involvement with the legacy program. I'll leave it at that. But I do think that for the UAP commentary community, this is very unhealthy. I think it's time the air was cleared. And I think as disclosure rolls out, hopefully in the next few months, I do think it's going to become clearer about what the prescribed roles were of certain individuals and whether the UAP community has been given the full story about people's roles. I think part of the issue here is national security constraints. I do think that there are people operating within UAP disclosure as advocates for disclosure, and I do think they are very genuine. But I do think that a decision was made right back at the time of the 2016 Clinton-Trump election campaign for the presidency that there was going to be a faction within the Defense Department and the intelligence community that tried to preempt what they thought was the likelihood that Clinton was going to become president. And in the expectation that Hillary Clinton was going to become president, there was the creation of the To the Stars Academy with various people, Jim Semivan, Lou Elizondo, others being brought in as representatives or kind faces of disclosure. And I do think that was a laudable and genuine initiative. But I suspect it may also have been an initiative designed to try to control or constrain the narrative. I don't know. I'm only speculating. But at some stage, there is going to have to be a clearer accounting, because it's clear there is bad blood, let's be honest about it, between James Lakatsky and Lou Elizondo. And there is towards Lou from other people in the social media UAP commentary community, people who have served within government, who obviously feel, I think, some resentment that things are not being properly represented. And I can kind of sympathise with Lou to some degree. I know exactly what Lou's role was, and I know he hasn't been allowed to talk about it, because for him to talk about it would be a breach of his national security oath, because it would go to the heart of the existence of the legacy UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program. But I do think that in the interests of clarity and public full disclosure, it really is time that this silly tiff between James Lakatsky and Lou Elizondo was resolved, because all it's doing is sending a message to the debunkers that they can have some fun with the discord and enmity between different groups and factions inside this community.
All right, we have a X post from Adrian. Good day. Say that in your best Aussie accent, Megan. Okay. Good day, Ross. Interested to hear your thoughts on the theory of a galactic federation that is essentially a coalition of advanced species that monitor and protect the galaxy and even interact with key figures on Earth. Wacky, yes, but...
Okay, the Galactic Federation. I have no idea whether there is such a thing. Obviously, if there is NHI and if there are NHI engaging benevolently or malevolently towards humanity, one might assume that there is a community or a grouping thereof of NHI. I just don't know. It all sounds very Star Trekky, and I think the first origins of the notion of a galactic federation go right back to the 1950s, to the 1970s, where people started channeling. People claimed that they were in psychic contact with what they called the Ashtar Command. It was messages were coming in from an alleged commander of extraterrestrials called Ashtar. And this was channeled by people like George Van Tassel and later others, and it described a vast galactic federation of light as a peacekeeping force opposing dark forces with millions of spaceships ready to assist and help humanity. Of course, that hasn't happened, and I think we're entitled to be deeply skeptical. In the 1990s, it became more of a New Age idea, and Sheldon Niddle's Ground Crew project heavily featured channeled communications from a photon-built galactic federation of planets claiming an impending mass landing. There was claims also of a union of over 200,000 star nations focused on ascension and defense against negative entities. It's all very happy-clappy, and there's not a jot of bloody evidence for any of it. Where it's got interesting, I notice Elena Danaan, for example, a contemporary UAP commentator, is claiming direct contact with a galactic federation of worlds. And media TV like Gaia, Ancient Aliens have had a lot of fun with the idea of a galactic federation. I just haven't seen any hard evidence. Probably the most interesting claim is a claim made by a guy who I would dearly love to sit down in front of a camera, and believe me, I have tried. Mr. Haim Eshed, the former head of Israel's space program. He's the former space security chief, former head of the Defense Ministry of Israel's Space Directorate for nearly 30 years, and a 3-time Israeli Security Award recipient. And in a Hebrew language interview with the Yediot Aharonot newspaper in Jerusalem, which was later widely picked up by Western media across the world, he made some extraordinary claims about things that he said in his book called The Universe Beyond the Horizon. He claimed that the US and Israel had been in secret contact with extraterrestrials from a galactic federation for years. He said that agreements were signed allowing ETs to conduct experiments on Earth in exchange for technological knowledge. He also claimed that there is a joint underground base on Mars with American astronauts, ET representatives. This is really interesting stuff. This is coming from the former head of Israel's space program. Nobody is saying that he is mentally unwell. He also said that President Trump was aware and on the verge of public disclosure. And this is interesting because he said this about 2 years ago. But he was asked, apparently, Trump was asked by the Federation not to do so to avoid mass hysteria until humanity evolves and reaches a stage where we will understand what space and spaceships are. Now, he presented these claims as factual, based on insider knowledge. But he offered no documents, there's no proof, there's no physical evidence, there's no corroboration. Other Israeli space officials, including a guy called Isaac Ben Israel, who's in the space program, acknowledged that Israel takes the possibility of extraterrestrial life very seriously, but he did a massive sideswipe of Verge and tried to avoid even talking about what it was that his former boss was talking about. He dismissed the specific Federation claims as, quote, going too far. So what do we know? There is no specific empirical, documentary, corroborative witness evidence to support the idea that there is such a thing as a galactic federation. All references trace back to either channelers making unsourced, unverified messages, anecdotal claims by people like Eshed. There's another official, actually, a former Canadian official, Paul Hellyer, the former Canadian Minister of Defence, no less, or Minister of National Defence. And he gave several UFO-related interviews where he referenced ET federations or councils where he claimed he'd been told about the existence of such a federation. It's really sad, actually. Paul Hellyer's since passed. He was a keen advocate for disclosure. Again, not somebody whose colleagues say was mentally ill or in any way given to any kind of mass delusion. He claimed to have spoken to American generals and to have been briefed about this stuff. But essentially, frankly, I think Haim Eshed's 2020 claims, that's how long ago it was, they are the highest profile on record official sounding statements. But believe me, efforts by myself and others to get anywhere near Haim Eshed to sit down with him to have a one-on-one have been frustrated by a very intense curtain of quite unusual security surrounding him, his family, his home, and any of his associates. If Haim Eshed ever did want to talk about the Galactic Federation or indeed any of those such allegations, we would welcome him with open arms on Reality Check, wouldn't we, Megan? Unfortunately,
Absolutely.
there is no prospect of that at the moment.
Yeah, I've also reached out as well and has not happened, but we're very interested in it.
Absolutely. No, I'd love to do an interview with Haim Eshed. It's one of the things we get questions about a lot. And frankly, sadly, it would appear that there are people inside the Israeli government that don't want Mr. Eshed to talk.